I used to believe every child in the world felt invisible sometimes. Maybe that's just part of growing up. Maybe every daughter sits quietly at the kitchen table at some point, watching her mother move around the room as if she isn't there. But as I grew older, I started to realize something that made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just sometimes. For me, it was always. My name is Emily. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows each other's dogs, where the same diner has been open for 40 years, and where maple trees line every street like quiet guardians. From the outside, my life probably looked normal, but inside our house, things were different. My mother never really loved me. At least, that's how it felt. Some of my earliest memories are strangely quiet. I remember sitting on the living room carpet, coloring pictures of flowers and butterflies, glancing toward the kitchen every few minutes. My mother would be there, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone or staring out the window. I remember thinking, maybe if I draw something really beautiful, she'll notice. So I would work carefully. Pink petals, blue sky, green grass. Then I'd run into the kitchen. "Mom, look what I made." She'd glance down for half a second. "Mm-hmm." That was it. No smile, no hug, just, "Mm-hmm." At first, I thought maybe I just needed to try harder. Kids believe love works like homework. If you do it better, you'll get a better grade. My father left when I was 5. He didn't disappear completely, but he moved across the country to Arizona and started a new life. Phone calls came once every few months, birthday cards sometimes arrived late, but most of the time it was just me and my mom in our quiet little house. After he left, my mother changed, or maybe she had always been that way and I was just old enough to notice. She worked long hours at a real estate office. When she came home, she looked exhausted and irritated by everything. The sound of the TV, the sound of the dishwasher, the sound of me. If I asked a question, she would sigh like I had just placed a heavy weight on her shoulders. "Emily, not now. Emily, I'm tired. Emily, go to your room." So I did. My room became my little universe. I filled it with books from the local library, stories about brave girls exploring forests, sailing oceans, discovering hidden worlds. Those stories felt warm in a way my house didn't. In those pages, mothers hugged their daughters, parents cheered at school plays, families sat around dinner tables laughing. I didn't understand why my life didn't look like that, but I kept hoping it might someday. One afternoon when I was 8, something happened that stayed with me for years. Our school had a family day. Parents were invited to visit classrooms, see art projects, meet teachers. All week long, my classmates talked about it. "My mom is bringing cupcakes. My dad's coming early from work. My grandma's coming too." I told them my mom would be there because I truly believed she would. That morning, I wore my favorite yellow dress. I brushed my hair 3 times. I even packed an extra chair next to my desk, just in case. The classroom filled with parents by noon. Laughter echoed off the walls, cameras flashed, kids proudly showed drawings and science projects. I kept glancing at the door. Every time it opened, my heart jumped, but it was never her. Eventually, the room began to empty. One by one, families left. My teacher gently touched my shoulder. "Emily, is someone coming?" I forced a smile. "She's probably busy." Inside, something cracked. That night, when my mother came home, I asked carefully, "Mom, did you forget Family Day?" She kicked off her shoes and walked straight to the fridge. "I had work." That was the whole explanation. No apology, no, "I'm sorry I missed it," just work. I nodded like it made sense, but later that night I cried quietly into my pillow. Not loudly. I had already learned that loud crying annoyed her. As the years passed, I became the kind of kid teachers described as very mature. which is usually just a polite way of saying, "This child had to grow up too early." I learned how to cook simple meals. I packed my own lunches. I did laundry by the time I was 12. My mother rarely noticed, or maybe she noticed and simply didn't care. Sometimes weeks went by without a real conversation between us. We were more like two strangers sharing the same house. But there was something strange about my mother. She could be charming to everyone else. At neighborhood barbecues, she laughed loudly. She complimented people's gardens. She hugged other children and told them how adorable they were. I used to stand nearby, watching, confused, because that warmth never reached me. It felt like standing outside a glass window in winter. You can see the warmth inside, you just can't feel it. High school became my escape. I joined clubs. I worked part-time at a small bookstore downtown. The owner, Mrs. Caldwell, was a kind older woman who smelled like cinnamon and old paper. One evening, she watched me carefully stack novels on a shelf. "You're very responsible, Emily." I shrugged. "I guess so." She studied my face for a moment. "You remind me of myself when I was young." Something in her voice made my chest tighten. For some reason, I asked quietly, "Was your mom nice?" She paused. Then she smiled gently. She tried her best. I didn't say anything, because deep down, I wasn't sure mine had even tried. When I turned 18, I left for college in Michigan. Moving away felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a dim room. No tension in the house, no walking on eggshells, no waiting for approval that never came. My mother barely reacted when I packed. She stood in the hallway, arms folded. "Don't expect me to pay for everything." "I won't," I replied, and I meant it. I worked 2 jobs during college, late nights, early mornings. It was exhausting, but it was also freeing. For the first time in my life, my effort was for me. Years passed. College turned into a career. I became a graphic designer and moved to Chicago. I built a small, quiet life, a cozy apartment, friends who felt like family, weekend coffee shops, art galleries, long walks along Lake Michigan, and slowly, something inside me began to heal. The little girl who once waited at classroom doors started to fade, not completely, but enough that the pain softened. My mother and I rarely spoke, maybe once every few months. The conversations were always brief, surface level. Weather, work, nothing deeper. It was almost like we had silently agreed to keep our distance, and strangely, that distance felt peaceful. Then, one winter evening, everything changed. I was sitting on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, working on a design project. Snow tapped softly against the window. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Mom. For a moment, I just stared at it. A strange feeling curled in my stomach. I answered. "Hello?" Her voice sounded different. Not cold, not distant, almost fragile. "Emily." There was a pause. Then she said something she had never said in my entire life. "I need your help." And suddenly, after 26 years of silence, distance, and invisible walls, my mother needed me. I didn't know it yet, but that phone call was about to reopen every old wound I thought had healed, and it would force me to face a question I had avoided my entire life. What do you do when the person who never loved you finally needs you? I didn't answer right away. Her words hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament that might shatter if I moved too quickly. "I need your help." My mother had never said those words to me before. Not when I was little, not when I was a teenager trying desperately to earn even a tiny piece of her approval. Now suddenly, she needed me. My fingers tightened around the phone. "What kind of help?" I asked carefully. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter than I remembered. I am in trouble, Emily." The word trouble made my stomach twist. What happened? She exhaled slowly. The house, the mortgage, some medical bills. I thought I could handle it, but things got worse. I stared out the window at the falling snow. The same house I grew up in. The same kitchen where I had stood with my crayon drawings. The same hallway where she barely said goodbye when I left for college. How bad is it? I asked. They're talking about foreclosure. That word landed heavy. For a moment, I felt a strange mix of emotions: concern, confusion, and something darker that I hated admitting even to myself: resentment. Because suddenly, after a lifetime of emotional distance, she was reaching out, not to say she missed me, not to ask about my life, but because she needed something: money, support, help. I closed my eyes. How much do you need? 20,000. The number made my chest tighten. It wasn't impossible, but it was a lot. Years of careful saving, extra freelance work, late nights building a stable life. And now she was asking for it. I know it's a lot, she added quickly, but I wouldn't ask if I had another option. Another long silence stretched between us. Then she said something that surprised me. I understand if you say no. Those words echoed in my head long after we hung up. That night, I barely slept. Memories kept rising like waves. The empty chair in my classroom, the quiet dinners, the cold responses, the years of feeling like a ghost in my own home. Part of me whispered, "You don't owe her anything." But another voice, softer and older, said something different. "She's still your mother." I turned on the bedside lamp at 2:13 a.m. and sat up. My apartment was silent except for the heam of the heater. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at the city lights outside. For years, I had carefully built distance between myself and that past, but now it was knocking on my door again, and I had no idea what to do. The next morning, I called someone I trusted, Sarah. She had been my best friend since college. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, Em, what's up?" I hesitated. My mom called. Sarah immediately knew that was serious. Oh. I told her everything: the mortgage, the medical bills, the $20,000. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. "I don't know." I sank into a chair. "It's strange, Sarah. She never needed me before. Not emotionally, not for anything. And now she does?" "Yeah." Sarah thought for a moment. "You don't have to decide based on the past alone," she said. "What do you mean?" "You can decide based on who you are now." Her words settled softly in my chest, because she was right. The question wasn't just about my mother. It was about the kind of person I wanted to be. 3 days later, I took a flight back to Ohio. I hadn't been home in almost 4 years. The town looked exactly the same. Same diner, same quiet streets, same rows of maple trees. But walking through it felt different now, like visiting a place from a dream you barely remembered. When I pulled into the driveway of the old house, my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. The porch light was on, the same yellow glow I remembered from childhood. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing, preparing myself. Then I stepped out of the car and walked to the door. I knocked. Footsteps approached slowly from inside. The door opened, and there she was, my mother. But she didn't look the way I remembered. Her hair had more gray, her shoulders seemed smaller somehow, and there were deep lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked older, more fragile. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "You came." Something about those words made my chest tighten. "Yeah," I said. She stepped aside and gestured for me to come in. The house smelled the same: Coffee, old wood, a faint hint of lemon cleaner. But the place felt emptier, quieter. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once shown her drawings. She folded her hands nervously. "I didn't think you would actually come." "I wasn't sure if I would either," I admitted. That honesty seemed to surprise her. For a moment, she looked down at the table. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "I know I wasn't a very good mother." The words hit me like a sudden gust of wind. My heart began to pound, because in 26 years, she had never acknowledged it, not once. I swallowed. "You're right," I said quietly. The truth hung between us, heavy, uncomfortable, real. She nodded slowly. "I figured you might say that." Her voice wasn't defensive, just tired. "I made a lot of mistakes. You were a child, and I treated you like an inconvenience." Hearing those words felt surreal, like stepping into a version of reality I had imagined but never believed would actually happen. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. Then she looked up at me, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw tears in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I just needed to ask for help." The room felt very still. Outside, the wind rustled the maple trees, and in that quiet kitchen, I realized something strange. For years, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought if she ever admitted the truth, I would feel anger or triumph or relief. But instead, I just felt sad. Sad for the little girl I had been, and strangely, sad for the woman sitting across from me, because she looked lonely in a way I recognized, the same loneliness I had carried for years. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting in my heart since that phone call. "Why now?" She looked confused. "Why now? What? Why reach out now?" I held her gaze. "You never needed me before." The question lingered between us, and after a long moment, my mother whispered something that changed everything. Because I realized something too late. My heart tightened. "What?" She took a shaky breath. "The only person who ever truly loved me," her voice broke, "was the daughter I pushed away." For a moment, I couldn't move. Her words echoed in the quiet kitchen. The only person who ever truly loved me was the daughter I pushed away. I stared at her, trying to understand what I was feeling. For so many years, I had imagined hearing something like that. An apology, an explanation, some kind of acknowledgement. But now that it was finally happening, it didn't feel like the dramatic moment I had pictured in my mind. It felt quiet, heavy, real. My mother wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, almost embarrassed by the tears. "I didn't come to that realization overnight," she said softly. "What changed?" I asked. She leaned back in the chair and looked around the kitchen, as if the walls themselves held memories. "Loneliness," she said. That word landed gently between us. "You don't really understand loneliness until you get older," she continued. "Friends move away. People get busy. Relationships fade." She looked down at the table. "And then one day you wake up and realize the house is too quiet." I knew that quiet. I had lived inside it for years. She took a slow breath. "When your father left, I was angry, not just at him, but at everything, at the world, at myself." Her voice trembled slightly. "And I didn't know how to be a mother." I waited, because for the first time in my life, she was actually opening a door that had always been locked. I thought if I worked more, stayed busy, ignored the pain, everything would somehow fix itself. "But it didn't," I said. She shook her head. No. Her eyes met mine. And you paid the price for that. A strange warmth and sadness filled my chest at the same time, because hearing her admit it didn't erase the past, but it made the past feel seen, acknowledged, real. We sat in silence for a while after that. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Finally, I asked, "What about the medical bills?" She sighed. "Heart issues." My stomach tightened. Is it serious? Not immediately life-threatening, but it required surgery. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Suddenly, the image of her from the doorway made more sense. The tired eyes, the fragile posture. She wasn't just older. She had been through something difficult. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. She gave a small, sad smile. "I didn't think I had the right." Those words stung in an unexpected way, because part of me wished she had called earlier, not for money, just to talk, just to try. But we couldn't go back. Time only moves in one direction. Later that evening, I walked through the house. It felt smaller than I remembered. Childhood homes always do. My old bedroom door creaked as I pushed it open. The room was mostly empty now, just an old dresser and pale outlines on the walls where posters once hung. I stepped inside slowly. Memories flooded back. Late nights reading under a blanket with a flashlight. Quiet crying that I tried to keep hidden. Dreaming about a future somewhere far away. I ran my fingers along the window frame. Snowflakes drifted outside in the dim porch light. A soft knock sounded behind me. I turned. My mother stood in the doorway. "I never changed this room," she said. I looked around. "Why?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because every time I thought about turning it into something else, it felt like admitting you weren't coming back." Those words stung in an unexpected way, because part of me wished she had called earlier. Not for money, just to talk, just to try. But we couldn't go back. Time only moves in one direction. The next morning, we sat at the kitchen table again. Coffee steamed between us. "I looked at my savings," I said carefully. Her shoulders stiffened slightly. "I can help," I continued, "but not the full amount." Her eyes widened a little. "How much?" 10,000. Her face filled with relief so suddenly it almost startled me. That's more than I expected. I'll also help you figure out the rest. Budgeting, payment plans, whatever we can do." She nodded quickly. "Yes, of course." For the first time since I arrived, something in the room felt lighter. Not perfect, but hopeful. Over the next few days, we worked together, sorting through bills, calling the bank, contacting insurance. It was strange. For the first time in my life, my mother and I were acting like a team. Not strangers, not enemies, just two people trying to solve a problem. Sometimes we even laughed a little. One afternoon, while searching through old paperwork, we opened a dusty box in the closet. Inside were dozens of childhood drawings, my drawings. Crayon flowers, stick figure families, rainbows and houses. I blinked in surprise. "You kept these?" She looked almost shy. "Yes." "Why?" She picked up one of the drawings carefully. A little girl holding hands with a taller woman under a bright yellow sun. "You always gave them to me," she said quietly. "And even though I didn't react the way I should have, I never threw them away." My chest tightened. All those years I thought she didn't care, but here was proof that something had mattered, even if she hadn't known how to show it. On my last night before flying back to Chicago, we sat on the porch together. The air was cold but clear. Stars glittered above the quiet neighborhood. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Me too." We sat there for a while, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. Then she said something very softly. "I know we can't erase the past." I nodded. "No. But maybe," she hesitated, "we can build something different going forward?" I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the distant figure from my childhood anymore. She was just a flawed human being, one who had made painful mistakes, but also one who seemed to be trying, and maybe that was enough for now. "I'd like that," I said. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and in that quiet moment under the winter stars, something fragile began to grow between us. Not instant forgiveness, not perfect love, but something real, a beginning. A few months later, back in Chicago, my phone rang an afternoon. It was my mother. This time when I answered, her voice sounded different, stronger. "Hi, Emily." "Hi, Mom." There was a brief pause. Then she said something simple. "I just wanted to tell you the bank approved the payment plan." "That's great." "And the doctor says my recovery is going well." Relief spread through my chest. "I'm really glad." Another pause followed. Then she added softly, "I also just wanted to call and ask how you are." For a moment I smiled, because that question, that simple, ordinary question, was something I had waited for almost my entire life. "I'm doing well," I told her, and for the first time ever, it felt like she truly wanted to know. Over the next few weeks, the calls continued. At first, they were short, 5 minutes, maybe 10. Simple conversations about everyday things. How's the weather in Chicago? Did the doctor give you new medication? Are you working on any interesting projects? Normal questions, ordinary questions. But to me, they felt almost extraordinary, because growing up, my mother had never asked about my life. Now she did. And every time she did, something inside me softened just a little more. One evening in early spring, I was walking home from work along the lake. The wind coming off Lake Michigan still carried a chill, but the city was waking up after winter. People were jogging. Dogs chased tennis balls across the grass. The sky glowed pink and orange as the sun dipped behind the skyline. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. "Mom," I answered. "Hey?" "Hi, Emily," she said. There was a lightness in her voice I hadn't heard before. "I planted the garden today." I smiled. "You haven't done that in years." "I know." I could almost hear her shrug through the phone. "I guess I wanted the house to feel alive again." That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended, because for most of my childhood, our house had never felt alive. It had felt quiet, empty, like two people simply passing through the same space. Over time, we began talking about deeper things too. One Sunday afternoon, we ended up on the phone for almost 2 hours. Somehow, the conversation drifted back to the past. "You were such a quiet kid," she said thoughtfully. I laughed softly. "I learned to be." She went quiet. Then she asked carefully, "Did you hate me?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it honestly before answering. "No," I said finally. "I didn't hate you. What did you feel?" I leaned back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. "Confused." She didn't interrupt. "I kept thinking there must be something wrong with me," I continued. "Like if I was better, smarter, more interesting, maybe you'd notice me." The silence on the other end felt heavy. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. And for once, the apology didn't feel like a formality. It felt like something she truly meant. That summer, she visited Chicago for the first time. I was nervous the whole week before she arrived. Old habits die slowly. Part of me worried the distance we had built between us would collapse the moment we were face to face again. But when she stepped off the train at Union Station, something surprising happened. She smiled. Not the polite smile she gave neighbors. a real one. "You look happy," she said. "I am." We spent the weekend exploring the city. Millennium Park, the Art Institute, a small Italian restaurant tucked into a quiet street. At one point, while we were walking along the lakefront, she suddenly stopped. "What?" I asked. She looked out at the water. "I wish I had done this with you when you were younger." My chest tightened. "We can do it now," I said gently. She nodded slowly. "Yes, we can." That night, she stayed in my apartment's guest room. Before going to bed, she stood awkwardly in the hallway. "Emily?" "Yeah?" She hesitated, like someone standing at the edge of unfamiliar ground. Then she said quietly, "I'm proud of you." The words hit me harder than I expected, because growing up, I had never heard them. Not once. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Thank you," I finally managed. She gave a small nod and went into the guest room. I stood there in the hallway for a long time after the door closed, letting those words sink in. Our relationship didn't magically become perfect. There were still awkward moments, still old wounds that occasionally surfaced. Sometimes we misunderstood each other. Sometimes we fell into old patterns of silence. Healing isn't a straight road. It twists. It slows down. Sometimes it feels like you're moving backward before you move forward again. But the difference now was effort. We were both trying, and that mattered. About a year after that first phone call, I visited Ohio again. The house looked different. Fresh paint, flowers blooming along the walkway. The garden she planted had grown beautifully. When she opened the door, she looked healthier than I had seen her in years. "Come see something," she said. She led me to the living room. Above the fireplace hung a large framed collage. My childhood drawings, the ones from the dusty box. Every crayon flower, every stick figure family, carefully arranged. I stared at it in disbelief. "You framed them?" She nodded. "They deserved better than sitting in a box." My throat tightened. For years, I had believed those drawings meant nothing to her. But now they were displayed in the center of the house, bright, visible, impossible to ignore. "I should have appreciated them back then," she said softly, "but I appreciate them now." That evening, we sat on the porch again, just like the first night I came back. The sun was setting behind the trees. Fireflies blinked in the warm air. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "people think love is something that either exists or doesn't." I looked at her. "But sometimes," she continued, "it's something people have to learn." I thought about that. About childhood. About loneliness. About forgiveness. Maybe she was right. Maybe some people simply never learned how to love until it was almost too late. But sometimes, not always, they still get a second chance. She glanced at me. "I'm grateful you answered the phone that night." I smiled softly. "I'm glad you called." We sat there quietly as the sky darkened. Two people who had spent years feeling like strangers, now slowly learning to be something else. Not the perfect mother and daughter from storybooks, but something real, something imperfect, something growing. And as the fireflies flickered across the yard, I realized something unexpected. My mother hadn't known how to love me when I was little, but in her own flawed, late, human way, she was learning now. And sometimes, even late love can still be beautiful.